This is the Brew World Order Podcast.
Welcome to the Brew World Order Podcast. My name is Mike Curtin. If you haven't subscribed yet, well, how rude. This is episode 54, and in this episode I sit down with Clayton LeBlanc, co-owner of Eppig Brewing Company in San Diego, California. Clayton explains how it's important to trust your team to make the right decisions, how being people's livelihoods equates to success for him, and he tells me about his gateway beer into the craft beer world, a beer called Corson Dunk. Clayton said it took him 8 hours to finish half of it. That's pretty interesting, considering it takes me about 8 minutes to finish half a six-pack, and that's no lie. Mikey likes his brewskis, but probably not as much as you like this podcast, right? Right? A man could dream, can he? Well, it's Clayton time. So it's time to sit back, crack open a beer, and enjoy the podcast. Clayton LeBlanc grew up in Willimantic, Connecticut. In 2001, he moved out to San Diego to figure out his life while enjoying some of the most beautiful weather you could find. He was working towards getting into grad school to become a dentist when he decided to take a job at Karl Strauss Brewing Company as a server and a bartender. While working at Karl Strauss, he not only started to learn about brewing, but he started to fall in love with the brewing industry as a whole. He figured out that being a dentist just wasn't what he wanted to do with his life, and possibly one day he would open his own brewery. In 2011, he took a job at Ballast Point Brewing Company, where he was just the 42nd employee that they hired. They started to grow so quickly that they promoted Clayton within a couple of months to a position where he helped to brew beer. From that point, he was on his way to learning how to become a brewer. In 2015, Ballast Point sold the Constellation, and Clayton started to think about his future at the brewery where he learned so much. Clayton and his co-worker brewer, Nate Stevens, started to talk about the possibility of leaving to open their own brewery. The timing seemed to be perfect when they were introduced to Todd Warsaw and Stephanie Eppig through a mutual friend. Stephanie told Clayton and Nate the background of her family's history in brewing, which goes all the way back to 1866 when her great-grandfather opened Leonhard Eppig's Germania Brewery in the Bushwick section of Brooklyn, New York. Stephanie and Todd also asked the two if they were interested in opening a brewery together. After their meeting, Clayton and Nate were ready to roll, and in 2016, the four partners opened Eppig Brewing Company in San Diego, California. And Clayton LeBlanc is here with me today. Clayton, how's it going?
Hey, man. How's it going?
All right. During that whole process of opening your own brewery from start to finish, what do you think was the most challenging part for you?
Yeah, anytime you take, any job, you take somebody out of being the thing they do actually really well. So I'm really passionate and truly love the act of brewing beer. Some people find it monotonous. I enjoy it. I love that. Get in there, move some weight around, monitoring, being precise. I love the act of physically brewing. It's like a dirty, sweaty job that also is science and requires a fair amount of precision. And, when you get good at it, you can train other people. And I always loved those aspects of brewing. I knew we were always turning out a good product, that was capable potentially of winning awards and being credible. So I felt a lot of satisfaction in my job. Like I knew I made a good product. We did it the best we possibly could. We were always trying to improve by adding laboratory equipment or new, better practices, always talking to other breweries about how can we do this better. And I would say the biggest trick for opening a brewery is that becomes like now, I don't want to use the words least important, but the smallest part of, especially here in San Diego, there's breweries everywhere now, and there's tons of them, but in our county, it's something like 150. Now, they're all different sizes. They're super tiny. They're super big. But when you get out of the gate, like, it's almost expected that the beer should be, award-winning level brewing. Otherwise, what are you doing?
Right, yeah.
That being a given, nobody cares after that. So it becomes, how's your fundraising? How's your organizational skills? Who knows how to do marketing? Who's really good at balancing the books? And all that stuff, I would say, was not something I was trained in, not something that even my other partners who actually take the lead on some of that stuff, those are the challenging things. Like, oh my God, how do we design a tasting room. Like, I can kind of design a brewery. We did that, and we like how it turned out. But all of a sudden, you're like, yeah, a tasting room. You need some chairs, you need some tables, and the walls should look nice. But obviously, that's not how you build a tasting room. You need, like, real fine skills, architecture, things like that. And so bringing in all those kind of talents from either outside or struggling through and discovering them ourselves, for me, that was it. It's not the hours, and it's not the brewing.
Right.
I would never, ever go back to my old job in the sense that I truly love what we do, but man, had I known how much the business part of running a business, like, would be the major part of what we were doing. You know, we were just young. And we were just I feel like I was 20 years younger 4 years ago.
Right. So that being said, what do you think's the biggest lesson you've learned so far?
For me, you know, coming from like the super anal side of brewing,
right?
You know, learning patience. You know, we're working with a team here, where I kind of was in charge of a team before, and I kind of could make the decisions. You know, you're working with partners, and everyone's got opinions, and figuring out the you know, everyone what lane everyone's going to be in, and being respectful, and working through those really stressful times, especially coming 2.5 years into the thing we go through COVID. You want to talk about taxing times,
right?
And learning to, like, hey, let's all take a minute, sit down. We all want to do the best we possibly can. Taking that beat before you react to something. Let's sit down. Let's talk about it. Let's get all the information on the table, because clearly all we want to do is make the best beer we can and succeed in our business. And learning how to do that coming from a place where, no one told you what to do before, it was, or much less so.
Right.
That was something early on that was like, oh, yeah. And when you don't have a big opinion about something, this is one of the most important things. When you don't have a big opinion about the shade of the drapes, let's say, we don't have any drapes, but
right. Okay.
If you don't care, you don't get involved in that streamline.
Right.
Everyone doesn't have to have something to say about the color of the wood of the tables if you don't care about the color of the wood of the table. So choose your not just choose your battles, but choose where can we make this more efficient by, hey, I'm going to focus on this. We're definitely going to get the best possible grain I can get, the best possible yeast I can. It's really important that the equipment we get is really streamlined. Whether or not those tasting room signs are vertical or horizontal or on TVs, like, whatever, letting go of some of that stuff and letting your team do what they do well was really important.
Understood. Who do you think's been a big inspiration for you in the beer industry?
The first brewery I worked at when I started as a server and made it up to doing bartending and at the restaurant downtown, Carl Strauss. The
right.
famous guy, Carl Strauss, who was like the great uncle of one of the founders, was this little German guy who came from Germany and was the head brewer of Pabst Blue Ribbon for like 50 years. And so when I worked at this restaurant, I came to be converted kind of from macro beer to the joys of craft beer. And like, hey, we can make similar styles and they can be elevated at better tasting and using better ingredients. You end up with a better product that tastes better. You feel better afterwards, all those things. Well, this guy, Carl Strauss, who was head brewer for Pabst Blue Ribbon for 50 years, was the spiritual father at Carl Strauss, and sort of like I got indoctrinated by hearing the stories of how he would go around from brewery to brewery and sort of like train kind of the first wave of craft brewers, from the 80s,
right?
When there was a pop back then, and I only met the guy in passing, like, hey, there's the grand old man. But I just always thought that was a neat character, because here he was, 80, 90 years old, and when he would come to the main restaurant downtown in San Diego, he was like revered, right? And
right.
This guy has lived his whole life, and I'm sure he's had all the challenges we have of kids and mortgages and blah, 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 but here he is. He's made it. He's 80 years old, and he is the coolest guy in the room everywhere he goes. And
that's awesome.
Like, why would you not want to be that guy? And I knew I wasn't going to be a basketball player, and I probably wasn't going to be, a lawyer or something like that. And wouldn't you much rather make beer for a living and be the guy that in the room everyone's like, yeah, that guy is responsible for all the beer we're drinking and all the good times that, at so many different places around the United States. I was like, yeah, that guy's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So how do you actually define success?
That's a good question. For me, I guess I'm in my 40s. I should probably have a more defined term for it. But when we got out, it was like that we were going to be able to pay ourselves and then, pay the rent, pay the mortgage. But somebody asked me that question of what's the coolest thing since you opened a brewery, and I would say this kind of goes into the success part. There is a financial part where you have to it has to work.
Of course,
you have to be in the black side of making money as opposed to in the red. But once I realized, 2 years in, that we had, say, 20 something employees. A guy or two in the brewery, and then all the tasting room staff for a couple of tasting rooms. And we were working on building a third location. Well, day to day, that was very much the job, and you're working and you're stressing about things. The fact that I realized, I was like, wow, these 20 people work here to live their lives.
Right.
I didn't know that was what I was going to realize was,
your people's livelihoods
than giving yourself a raise or something like that. And it was, whoa, no, I want to help provide for all these families. And it made me think, years and years ago, being from the East Coast, the Yingling family, has been around for 100 and something years, and all the people who went through there. And I'd heard that story, and there's some lighter sides and darker sides to that story, for the Yingling family. But just the fact, I was like, the grandkids can get to know people who have generationally worked through their operation. And I was like, man, someday that I would, that Carl Strauss guy, I would love to look back and know that families were raised through what we're doing here, because it doesn't happen without them too. So it's a very much families were raised by us doing this work.
Right.
And I think that is success, in the most purest, wholesome internal sense, more than some bank statement or whatever.
Right. Yeah, you're literally breeding brewers, almost, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
my kid told me last night that he would either like to be a professional flag footballer or a brewer like that. And I was like, cool. Yeah. I know right now which one of those actually exists, so we'll just keep on rocking with that.
Yeah, we'll shoot for one of those right now.
Yeah.
How important is a mental break after everything that you have to deal with throughout the week of being a owner and a brewer?
Well, it's become more important over time. Everyone has their own threshold. I would say you do when you open a business, and especially, my experiences with this, we did, 100-hour weeks, as all startup type people do, for a year or two, and then it was 70-hour weeks, and then it was, it got a little better as we kind of were able to grow a little, hire some people, but you're always on call. And you even lie to yourself that you're taking time off when you're still on call. You still got the phone. I'm on top of Mount Laguna out here in San Diego, and I can take a phone call.
Right.
So I think we've all since then taken some amount of time off, because you'll always push yourself further than you could ever ask any of your staff really to push. And you don't realize you've gone too far until, my significant other was like, maybe you should take a little time off.
Right.
You're a little tense around the house. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And so we did. In fact, I'm going out of town this weekend for the first time since kind of the COVID beginning. We've taken some time off, but we haven't gone anywhere.
Right.
So, finding a place where you can free yourself from the phone and be like, oh, I literally can't take a phone call because I'm on a boat, I'm on a plane, I'm in the mountains far away.
Right.
I think is the way for people who are sort of super driven. You have to allow yourself to go to a place like that where it takes the option away. Because even if you're not answering the phone, that it's there is like a crutch that you can help if you need to, or make a decision if you need to. And so in a sense, you've never let go all 10 tenths. You've only let go like 3 tenths or 5 tenths. So if you can get yourself to 8 or 9 tenths, because you're probably still thinking about work. But for me, I found it really, really important. And our partners, we kind of just got to a point where, you know what, I am not coming in Saturday, Sunday. Call me if the building's on fire, because I live close by.
Right.
Maybe I can help, but like otherwise, I'm going to peace out for a little bit. And I found it really important for hanging out with my son and the rest of my family, just to sort of be present with them, as present as I am with the business.
Right. Yeah, it's important to have a good team so that you can kind of chill back and rely on them when you don't want to be there.
Absolutely. And empower people to make good decisions. You got to train them as much as you can, and then at some point, you kind of got to let people figure it out. When they screw up or don't do things the way you like, great learning moment. Now we all learn from this, and no one will ever forget it. Let's move on.
So, like you had mentioned, there's 150 breweries in your area, give or take. What do you think brings people to your place specifically?
Well, we've been very fortunate to have, because we had experience when we got before, we were able to open and we had pretty good systems in place to make, decent beer right off the bat. Like, there was no questioning, once we write this recipe and use these ingredients that we know about, this malt we know about, the yeast we know about, water that's filtered in a way that we have chosen, and the hops that we have hand chosen. We knew that it should be decent, and so that helped. Those initial reviews were really good. And then doing something different at a time when the industry was moving, at least in San Diego, was huge on West Coast IPAs, and then moving into hazies. We were kind of coming out in a totally different direction, doing not specifically lagers, but always having between, 4 or 6 on at a time, and executing those really well when nobody else was really kind of focusing on that. So it was something to talk about, I think, in a town full of really big hop heads, which includes us. Like I said, I made all the sculpin on earth during the sweet spot of when it was like so different than any other IPAs. Now the United States has really, really good beer everywhere.
Right.
So I think having that little bit of experience, so that people's first time coming, the beer was on point, was really helpful, so that those reviews kind of, I wish they didn't matter, and I don't read them anymore, but that kind of got us off the ground. And then being able to offer somebody something different, because so many of us really do like all the styles of beer. Yeah, right. And nobody's representing Kolsch, alt beer, Dunkel, Bach, different types of light lagers. Everyone calls it a Pilsner, but there's like a whole bunch of variants. There's your Helles, your Pilsners. We make this, my favorite beer is our Fest beer that's on right now, that Wiesen style meadow Oktoberfest beer that you would have if you were in Germany. Right. Being able to, a Baltic Porter, which is a really wonderful style, as well as already knowing how to kind of do the styles that are more expected. Your East Coast, your West Coast IPAs, pale ales. We do some sour stuff as well, big stouts. We tend to keep our adjuncts really low, so we do have some beer we have a Berliner Weiss that has raspberry and cherry in it, but we feel that is the style and appropriate. And we tend to keep a lot of vanilla and coconut and peppers. We kind of did that at our old job. And so we really seek for precision in the styles that we make that are kind of like more representative of classic styles with maybe a little bit of a San Diego twist is kind of how we do things. Right. And I think that's let us find our niche.
Gotcha. I like this question a lot. I'm curious of yours. What was your gateway beer into the craft world?
There's a beer called Korzendonk from Belgium. Okay. I believe it's from Belgium. And I had a resident assistant at Clemson University who I think when I turned 20 or 21 gifted it to me. Like you gave a kid who just drank like Miller Lite and didn't know any better. And one night he was like, "You have to finish this bottle," and it took me, 8 hours to finish half of it. And but I never forgot it. And it was this big, kind of, I won't say boozy, but rich flavored beer with like a lot of esters in it. There was banana and kind of plum and raisin and date and all these flavors that I didn't know could be associated with beer.
Right.
And that was like, outside of maybe like a Shinerbach or a Guinness, the first time I had anything that was outside of, American light lager.
Right. Yeah.
Which I didn't like. It took me forever to get into beer when I was a younger person, even before I should have been enjoying it.
Yeah, same here,
Yeah, it was definitely when I could get it, I was more of like a rum and Coke guy. Why? Because it tastes like vanilla and Coke. These are
right.
Captain Morgan and Coke.
Captain Morgan and ginger and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was sort of my first transition, and then there was sort of a lull until I started working at that brewery in downtown, where I just had always been a server, so I was able to land a job at a place that I heard was good, and they kind of like taught me about beer, and I was still doing some of the light beer stuff, and then also bringing home beer from the brewery, and more and more it was beer from the brewery, and I think I went through the most progression at Karl Strauss, where I started with they have a famous beer called Red Trolley. It's a big red ale, and that's really smooth and easy to drink and low on hops. And then I tried the Hefeweizen they had, and I was like, okay, banana and smooth, and I really like that, which is funny because I don't lean towards these styles anymore. And then I climbed the ladder up to their IPA eventually, and some of their big barrel aged stuff, and was like, I kind of went through the whole progression.
Right.
Learning to sell that stuff when I was a server, and it was probably like the best beer education you could get, while it paid me,
Right. What do you think's next for your brewery? What does the future look like for Eppig?
Well, it's been a weird year and a half, and thankfully I think we're coming out of it as, you got some battle scars, but like stronger. We were able to do some pivoting to doing more canning offerings, and have since been able to kind of hold on to that market. And so, hey, the more you can expose your beers out to the world, the more people are going to buy them, and that helps us grow. So we've already been ordering more equipment to make more beer and hiring some more staff to help sell that beer. So I'm hoping we can get another location going. We've got this great one here in Vista, California, which is like northeast San Diego, kind of by Carlsbad, and then we've got one right down on the harbor in San Diego in Point Loma. So, being able to share our beer with people throughout the county, and then maybe grow into some of the other counties of Southern California to kind of share what we're doing, and then be able to consistently support that sale. That's what we kind of want to do.
Right.
And maybe a brew pub down the road. The one trick about building your big dream brewery is realizing that we moved out of our tiny brewery and into a bigger brewery, but we didn't take the tiny brewery with us. And now I want to make small batches of different stuff. So we're going to have to, at some point, bring that back into the fold of getting either a small brew house or a brew pub somewhere where we can really get back to our roots of doing research and development, which is what Nate had done while he was at Palace Point, and kind of giving ourselves a chance to try things that may or may not work,
Right.
And
yeah.
That's the only way you can really grow. We've just taken all our knowledge and performed precision brewing here. And I want to get back to all right, let's try some weird stuff. Let's try, or weird for us, which is moving things a decimal point. But
Right.
So that's what I'm hoping that's in the next, year or two, whatever. We're obviously always looking at it, going down the road. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, very cool. And if somebody came to you and asked you for advice on opening their own brewery, what would you tell them?
I'd probably ask them some questions about their backstory and stuff. And I can only talk from a brewer who opened a brewery. I wasn't an accountant first.
Right.
So some amount of well-fundedness is always a good choice. We were not well-funded, but we had a unique program in San Diego where somebody had built a brewery and offered to lease it to us So maybe it wasn't exactly our design, but I didn't have to outlay like $1.5 million for like a tiny little brewery.
Right. Okay.
So we sort of got freed from that upfront having to have a couple $1 million. But let's just say you're well funded, fully vet your team, and that is more than just getting together and having a couple beers. And you basically can't plan enough. You can't be flexible enough after things kind of happen. And there's no black and white to when is it time to stick with the plan and push past where it feels uncomfortable. But just know that like that's a thing. So being well funded, being well planned, and having a really solid team that you trust. Trust is a huge word. When our partners trusted us to get on the brew house the first day and go. And if you wouldn't trust somebody with your life savings, find somebody that maybe you would.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely, because that's essentially what this was, right? I put all the dollars I had, which was not many, to buying a crappy van and ingredients and hand trucks and a keg washer, and it was go time. So take all that. There's enough uncertainty. There's enough uncertainty when you go out to do this. You got to eliminate as much as you can, but don't let it paralyze you.
Gotcha. So did you happen to have a funny story for us?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of hijinks that take place in a brewery, especially a fast-growing one like in our old job.
I'm sure.
I think one of the funniest stories now that we have Eppig open is kind of how the chips fall. So not only do I do brewing, but I'm sort of in charge of sales, right? We're pretty small. And when we got open, we were like, okay, we got to make a West Coast IPA. So we had this idea, and Nate and I sat down, he wrote a recipe, we talked about it, and I was like, great, contemporary West Coast IPA. It's got a touch of color to it, but really kind of orangey and grapefruit zesty. I was like, easy drinker all day long. He's like, I want to call it 1045 to Denver. And I was like, that is the worst name I have ever heard. And the backstory on that is when we were at Ballast Point, we brewed a beer called Piper Down. That beer went to Great American Beer Festival and won a silver medal, which in 2012, 13, like that was a really big deal.
Right,
and it's still a big deal to this day. You can hang your business's hat on winning some of those awards. It can really help you for sales and things like that. So I'm on the brew house in Scripps Ranch in San Diego. He's in Denver. Denver is a great place to get into trouble, especially when the owners of Ballast Point were there. They went out and they partied and they all had a great time. And at the time, wacky tobacco brownies were legal in Denver, but not here. And so people really put the wood to it and enjoyed the cannabis available to them,
right,
as well as all the beer available to them, and they partied really hard. On the next day, they're all taking that long drive. If you've ever been to Denver, out to the airport, it's 30 miles outside of town. And one of the guys in the car turns to some of the fellows in the back and goes, yeah, it's 10:45. We got to hurry up, get to the airport, whatever. The driver's like, hey, man, who are you talking to? He's like, oh, they just asked me what time it was. And they all looked in the mirror and looked behind him, and all the guys were passed out. So the guy was hearing things. And he just put his hands in his head and was like, oh, my God, get me home. I just want to go home. And this is the highest ranking person in the car. So it's kind of funny that the manager guy is the one who's in trouble. And from that day on, the kind of code around our work was like, hey, man, how was your weekend? And if you had taken it too far, it was like, oh, it's kind of 10:45.
Right.
10:45 all weekend long. It just means you put the wood to it a little too hard.
Right.
So that's funny that all occurred. I was not present. And now we have a brewery together, and I'm partners with my friend Nate, who was in the car that day. And I have to tell this story to every single person who drinks our best-selling IPA.
Right.
And I wasn't even part of this. I'm not even part of the story.
But it's a great story.
Yeah. We've done our best. We've had some luck at Great American Beer Festival. And I remember the first year we won a medal. I went out and created my own story with him. We went out and we put the wood to it ourselves. And I was like, I don't have to think about that story. Except every time someone goes, hey, man, why you call that beer 10:45 to Denver? And I go, well, let me tell you a story.
Well, now you know. That's a great story, man. Yeah. So I have a little segment called Quick Fire 5 quick questions, beer related. Ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Somebody walks into your brewery right now. What's one of the beers you'd recommend they try?
Fest beer, number one.
Fest
Got to
beer.
do it. It's Oktoberfest season, and that's like my favorite beer that we make almost year round, and it's appropriate for this part of the year.
Gotcha. Favorite brewery other than your own?
Ooh, good question. We've got some awesome ones in San Diego, but I'll say there's one in Germany that I really like called Schlenkerla, or Schlenkerla. They're in Bamberg, and they make a lot of really smoky beers, which is kind of this weird niche. Basically, your beer tastes like barbecue. Some people get grossed out by that. I love it. So I'd say that's one of my favorite breweries, but there's so many out there.
Yeah, that smoky flavor is it's very unique. It's very I don't know. You have to really be into it, you know.
It's polarizing for sure.
Yes.
Just I'm somewhere. Hey, my parents fed me some seafood as a kid, and it turns out a little kid likes oysters. You can't get my kid to try that stuff to save his life. So who knows?
Right. Favorite style of beer?
We make so many lagers, and I've been so focused on it for a long time. I just really get off on making a really, really clean lager beer that has nowhere to hide in it. So one of the things I like about the lighter styles, even Kolsch Helles Pilsner, Fest beer, your lighter Martzens and Dunkels and things, is that there's very, very few places to hide once that beer is finished and you're serving it to your customers. So the geeky part of me that loves making beer loves it when it's like making an awesome 3-point shot, like with the timer, with the buzzer coming down.
Right.
That when you release it out of your finger and it's going in, and you nail a beer, that they have a similar feeling to me the first time you pour it and you drink it. So that's the beer I really like when we brew. I wish we could do it faster because it takes a long time.
It does, yeah. Yeah. Last beer you drank that blew you away?
There's a brewery in San Diego that's pretty popular called Smith. They're one of kind of like the OG, bigger, craft breweries. There's a great team over there that's brewing beer. They work on like a beautiful brew system that's from Germany. They make a barrel-aged stout called Speedway. Well, they make a stout called Speedway Stout.
Yes.
Then they barrel-age that in all kinds of different things. And a friend of mine opened one at dinner the other night that I've had before, but every time I have it, I'm always amazed how good Vietnamese coffee Speedway Stout is. So if you can get it, it's a good one.
I think I might have tried that when I was there, man. They have some amazing variations of their Speedway Stout. It's just by itself is just a great stout. But yeah, phenomenal.
If you like the really, it steps up into that kind of like viscousy, motor oily, feeling, which I really enjoy for dessert and kind of on the side by itself. It's not something I want to drink pints of. It's not something I want to have with dinner. But like with a group of friends, sharing 4 6-ounce tasters, man, that beer is just really special.
It's almost like a meal in itself.
Yes, for sure.
And you have 1 keg of beer to hold you over for a 2-week quarantine. What beer are you choosing?
2 kegs of Fest beer.
2 kegs of Fest beer. All right, Clayton, thank you very much. That's all I got for you, man.
Okay. Hey, well, thanks. It was good talking to you. Good to meet you. Thanks for coming by. Hope you had a good time checking out beer in San Diego.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order podcast, here with Clayton LeBlanc of Eppig Brewing in San Diego, California. Thanks, man.
You bet.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to my interview with Clayton LeBlanc, co-owner of Eppig Brewing Company in San Diego, California. Whether you're passing through, you live in the area, or just visiting a friend nearby, you should definitely check him out. Also, give him a follow on social media. Every other Sunday, I'll be releasing a new episode, so subscribe and you'll never miss one. Also, be sure to check us out on social media for updates on the podcast. I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order podcast. You stay safe out there.